Okay, it's 12:30 and we'll get started with our webinar now. My name is Laura Isles. I'm one of the co-directors of the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. We are one of 4 regional integrated pest management centers supported by USDA NIFA crop protection and pest management program. We have a mission to coordinate IPM across the region by sharing and promoting IPM research, extension, and teaching activities. During today's webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A portion at the bottom of the screen, and then our speaker will handle those questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm very excited to introduce Lynnae Jess from Michigan State University, one of the other co-directors of the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center, who's going to talk about the highlights and impacts of the 2018 to 2022 USDA NIFA North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. So welcome, Lynnae, and I'll let you take it away.
All right, thank you, Laura. Laura said I am Lynnae Jess, and I am one of the co-directors. I am located at Michigan State University. And today what I'm going to talk about is the highlights and the impacts of the 2018 through 2022 USDA NIFA North Central IPM Center. The IPM centers are funded every 4 years. So ours started in September 1st of 2018, and then we get an automatic 1-year no-cost extension. So this grant actually ended August 31st of 2023. So our mission statement for this funding cycle that I'm talking about was to improve health, environmental, and economic benefits by providing leadership and cooperating with our partners to facilitate development and adoption of IPM solutions based in the North Central region. And so then our goals were to improve economic benefits and then reduce potential risks to human health and to the environment. And this was accomplished by increasing the adoption of IPM practices through funding IPM activities, facilitating communication and collaboration, providing support for IPM groups, and then evaluating our center activities. So the personnel for the North Central region during this cycle were myself, and then Laura Isles and Darren Mueller as co-directors, Jackie Pohl, the communication specialist, and Kelsey is the research administrator. So as part of our grant, when we wrote it, you have to put in signature programs. And so back in 2017, we sat down with our steering committee and said, what signature programs should we be working on for the next 4 to 5 years? And between them and us, these are the signature programs that we came up with. So we had invasive species and reemerging pests, pest resistance management, pollinator and monarch conservation, and then advanced genetic tools in IPM. Back in 2017, there was a lot of talk about genetic tools and where we were going with them, and so that was one of our signature programs. And these are based on regional and national priorities to support sustainability and food security. So I'm going to go through each of those signature programs and talk a little bit about what we did, some of the outputs, outcomes, and some of the other things that we did. So underneath the invasive species and reemerging pests, one of the big things that we work on in the North Central IPM Center are pest alerts. These are one-sheet, two-sided handouts, and they can be on insects, diseases, and weeds, and they're basically, most of them are new invasive species. So there's not a lot of information out about them, and so we want to get these out quickly and let people know about these new pests. And they usually cover the origin and distribution of the pest, their life cycle, identification. We have pictures in there, damage, and maybe some general management strategies. We don't include pesticide controls just because those can change so quickly. So the North Central IPM Center actually produces these, but they're done in collaboration with all of 4 regional IPM centers. And every 2 years they are reviewed and updated if needed. And during the grant funding cycle I'm talking about, we had 33,539 pest alerts were downloaded from the website. Currently there's 19 pest alerts available and updated, and 16 of the pest alerts have been archived. You can still see them. These are archived because the pest has been around for so long now that there's a lot of other information, but if you need to, you can still see those. We do a lot of our work in the North Central IPM Center through our working groups and then through our critical issues grants. So I'm just going to list the working groups and critical issues, excuse me, that kind of fell underneath each of our signature programs. And I'll talk more about the working groups later in the presentation. So for invasive species, we had 2 working groups, public gardens as sentinels against invasive plants, and then one on building continuity across state invasive lists. And the critical issues that we funded were on spotted wing Drosophila, Asian longhorn tick, spotted lanternfly, and soybean gall midge. For when we get to pest resistance management, again, we did a lot of that work through our working groups and critical issues. We had the War Against Weeds podcast, which actually talked about how to management principles to mitigate herbicide resistance. And then for critical issues, they were on Palmer amaranth and water hemp, herbicide-resistant weed diagnostics, soybean cess nematode resistance management, and then certified crop advisor perspectives regarding pest resistance. For the pollinator and monarch conservation signature program, we had 4 working groups: IPM for bees, managed pollinator protection plans, we call MP3, pollinator education and action for youth, and the rights of ways habitat. And one of the critical issues that we funded were best management practices to reduce non-crop pesticide exposure in bees. So when we came to the advanced genetic tools in IPM, we really wanted to know what was needed. So Context has been the group that we've contracted with to kind of do our impact analysis and evaluation. And so we asked them to do a needs assessment to understand what the needs were or gaps involving genetic tools. So they basically did a broad landscape scan looking at gene editing and biotech and row crops, and then also breeding advancements in specialty crops. And the genetic tools that they looked at were CRISPR, meganuclease, TALEN, and then zinc finger nucleases. And they interviewed some groups that they had been working with in the past, or others that they knew were working in gene editing tools or genetic tools. And they wanted insights on the broad identification of new technologies and breeding techniques out there, what the public acceptance is for these tools, are growers adopting them, how do these genetic tools fit into the IPM space, what are some of the pipeline genetic tools, and then current education and identification gaps. Okay. So they interviewed Corteva, Benson Hill, the Farming and Food Narrative Project, United Soybean Board, UC Davis Seed Biotechnology Center, and Feed Your Mind. And see, these are just some of the interview insights that they gave us. They felt the comment fell into 5 broad categories. In scientific research, they said the trends seem to be positive regarding gene editing in the U.S. and areas outside of Europe. They fell under problem solving, so are they looking at hunger, nutrition, food safety, deforestation, grower needs? If it addressed those issues, then it appeared to be resonating. Communication is going to be key. As we all know, if you're dealing in the integrated pest management area, it's hard to get that idea across. And so the genetic tools is, I think, maybe even harder. And so communication on what the science is and the benefits will really be key. And then it has to be a grower need. So it has to look at their balance sheets. Are they going to make money using it? The sustainability of it, and then crop rotations. And then for gene editing IPM, if it looked at diseases, insects, and weeds, it was used as an IPM tool. If you want more information on that, just contact one of us and we can send you the whole thing that Context gave us. So for North Central IPM Center, the 2 big ways that we felt we have worked with our signature programs and getting in the information out and doing the whole network and collaboration is through our working groups and our critical issues grants. And for this funding cycle, we had $200,000 set aside each year for working groups and about $100,000 for critical issues. Working groups have to be multi-state collaborations. They have to address a regional IPM priority. They do not have to have members just within the North Central region. And in fact, that's one of the big pluses. And I think what has made our working groups work well is that we have members from all over the place. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. They can be multi-year, but they have to apply for the working group every single year. So they can't apply for 2 years at a time. It has to be 1 year. And then the next year they have to reapply and show that they've been making good progress. And during our funding cycle of 2018 through 2022, we actually gave out $896,792 to the working groups. And during that time period, we had over 835 working group members. So we asked, when the working groups submit their proposals, we ask them to include their members list. Sometimes it's hard. I know the Rights of Way Habitat Working Group actually has about 1,500 just themselves. But the list that they gave us had over 835 members. That was 299 different affiliations which included 75 colleges and universities, 47 states, 7 Canadian provinces, and 4 other countries. So the critical issues grants, these are one-time, basically we thought of them as seed funding to help them initiate work. So they wanted to apply for a grant, but they didn't have enough baseline data, and so this is a good way for them to get that data. And they could apply for up to $50,000. The total that we spent during this project was $580,144. So now I'm going to go through the list. We actually funded 23 working groups during this grant cycle. Some of them were 1 year, some have been multiple years. So that's where we come up with the 23. We've broken them into kind of broad categories of grow and specialty crops, pollinators and beneficial insects, human and animal health, and then emerging pests and invasive species management. So they're not in any particular order, they're kind of in alphabetical order, but so I'm going to go through them real quickly. Again, if you want more information on each of them, you can look at our website, ncipmc.org, and you can get more information. For the alfalfa pest management one, they actually added 36 articles to the Crop Protection Network Encyclopedia and illustrated 9 disease life cycles on alfalfa alone. The second one is actually the Crop Protection Network. These are funded separate years. And so they have many educational resources they've done. They also looked at certified crop advisor continuing ed credit exams. They did a disease loss estimator calculator. They do the I See Dead Plants podcast. They've done virtual crop scouting schools, and then lots of other publications for their encyclopedia. The Great Lakes Hop Working Group, they completed hop production tours. They've done some online courses. They've done virus ID surveys and the diagnostic tools, and then they've also conducted a hop podcast. Great Lakes Vegetable Working Group has been around for quite a few years, and they have annual meetings for extension professionals. They've done some grower exchanges in the summer so people can learn from each other, especially newer growers. They've done tour for early career individuals, and then during 2020, during COVID, when they couldn't have any meetings, they actually came up with a vegetable beet podcast, and that helped a lot of growers. We had a hemp IPM working group. The industrial hemp was kind of a really big thing. It had a lot of growth up to 2020, and there wasn't a whole lot of information. We didn't have pesticides that were registered for use on it. A lot of people didn't know about diseases and insects and all that. So they brought together specialist agents and growers, and then anybody else who was interested to integrate their knowledge and experience. They used Basecamp to post pictures, identification, and worked from there. The Midwest Fruit Group, they actually worked together to publish the Midwest Fruit Pest Management Guide, and that covers Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Ohio, and Wisconsin. We had a North Central Nursery IPM working group for a couple of years, and they conducted annual meetings, and they developed crop profiles for nursery crops in the region. And we have an organic and IPM working group, and it was to facilitate collaboration between IPM and organic, and they wanted to address water quality, environmental and human health, and farmer productivity and viability. They produced journal articles, position papers, white papers, fact sheets, and webinars. And the last two in the row in specialty crop, the first one is the pulse crop working group. And a lot of people say, well, what's a pulse crop? So that's dry edible peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans. And they've organized meetings not only for professionals, researchers, educators, but they also include growers in their meetings to help them come up with priorities. They developed educational materials, including the Pea Compendium. They've done the Growing Pulse Crop podcast for several years. And they did a series of pest diagnostic cards. And these diagnostic cards are basically made to fit inside a pocket, a shirt pocket for most farmers. They're laminated so that they could be taken out into the field to help identify pests that were out there. These have been so popular that they actually had several other countries that asked for them and then had them translated and used in their countries. The sunflower pathology, this is one of our smaller working groups. And the reason they came into being was one of the leading sunflower researchers, plant pathologists in the country was retiring. And they knew they were going to be losing all of that institutional memory. So they started this working group, of course, the researchers who are working in sunflowers, and they actually include 2 specialists from Australia. And they've developed disease pages on the National Sunflower Association website. They've done book chapters. They've done a series of diagnostic cards and then other disease management resources for growers. The second group that fell underneath our one of our signature programs was the pollinators and beneficial insects. And these are all a little bit different, even though they deal with honeybees and pollinators and monarchs. The first one is IPM for bees. And they again brought together researchers, extension, and stakeholders working with honeybees, native bees, and anything bee-related IPM. They organized symposiums, they had workshops and virtual seminars, they had videos on beekeeping, and varroa mite was one of their big educational components they worked on. So how do you do a varroa mite check to know if you need to treat or not? And they conducted an IPM for bees extension exchange seminar. The Managed Pollinator Protection Plan was established to address the limited progress in the pollinator health and challenges faced by states and tribes that by law were required to implement managed pollinator protection plans. So one of the things that they did that, and they've also provided pollinator IPM education for pesticide applicators with an online course. They have a course for land managers, and they have a presentation for trainers to give at pesticide recertification credit clinics. The Pollinator Education and Action for Youth, they developed educational programs, including lesson plans on pollinator significance, habitat enhancement, and IPM. And they recruited educators and provided training resources and supplies for the curriculum, and they made sure that all this curriculum aligned with the K-12 education standards. The Rights of Way is Habitat actually engages over 400 organizations with industries, academia, and governments in the U.S. and Canada, and they're promoting pollinator-oriented habitat conservation on energy and transportation landscape. So Department of Transportation's pipeline companies, solar panel companies, all those are part of this. And they focused on information dissemination, collaboration, and tool development to support habitat creation. They developed one of the voluntary conservation agreements to provide habitat for the monarch butterfly, so it's the Candidate Conservation Agreement and Assurances. And this was done in work with the Fish and Wildlife Service through the Endangered Species Act. In case the monarch becomes an endangered species, this plan will be in place for those companies to use. For human and animal health, we had an ag and wildlife coexistence working group. This was to help farmers deal with wildlife damage in their fields, and also if wildlife was bringing in livestock diseases. They did 8 wildlife ag bulletins. They did a survey to learn what challenges and needs are related to wildlife management, and they've done a podcast. The Urban Ag IPM working group, they're working with urban agriculture, the community gardens, urban ag farmers, beginning farmers, there's non-English speakers, and then underserved populations. A lot of times the operators of these gardens don't have a lot of experience in specialty crop production and IPM, so they conducted a survey on what their needs were. They've created YouTube videos, and then they've produced 12 cards on pests affecting urban ag. The Public Tick IPM working group, they raise awareness about effective IPM strategies to control ticks and then reduce the incidence of tick-borne diseases. And their membership, again, is kind of wide-reaching and kind of unusual for most of us in IPM. It has a lot of policymakers, there's researchers, there's people who have tick groups in their states, or Lyme disease, a lot of them are looking at, and so they're working on that. They have hosted the Tick IPM Academy, so people know how to correctly identify and scout for ticks. They have monthly webinars, they have policy fact sheets and posters, and then pest alerts that they worked on. The School IPM Working Group provides information for IPM in schools while minimizing risks. So they produce the Pest Defense for Healthy School trainings and resources to K-12 school staff and students, and they've already trained over 4,000 individuals, and they now have a Green Shield certification that's available for schools. The Midwest Grows Green Lawns and Land Forum. This enhances sustainable landscape policies and practices. They host webinars, they have a website, they've implemented the Technical Assistance Program and established the Green Shield Certified for Landscapes program. And they work mainly with parks and with schools to kind of reduce the use of pesticides in areas where children might be playing. There we go. Underneath the emerging pests, we have our building continuity across state invasive list. This was created to do a shared database of scientific references to identify invasive plant species. A lot of state-based states have a list of invasive plants. There wasn't always a lot of research behind that, scientific research as to why that plant was invasive or not. And so their goal is to proactively identify invasive species and then promote efficient resource utilization among the states. The Pest Alert Network is the next one. They facilitate improved communication between stakeholders to address pest threats. They generated maps of insect sightings and then developed a mesonet tool for monitoring predictions to help growers know what's coming. The Public Gardens as Sentinels, they empower public gardens to lead in addressing invasive plant issues by tracking and then sharing information on plants that have escaped from cultivation. So this will help other gardens maybe not plant those to start with. And they've launched a database for gardens to store their information and share between them. And then the War Against Weed podcast, they provide current info on integrated weed management to farmers and agronomists. They have over 16,000 downloads and over 100 podcasts. So just real quickly, you've seen most of these already, but the critical issues that we funded, we had the soybean gall midge one, looking at pest ecology and identifying management practices. There was the best management practices for non-crop pesticide exposure for bees, understanding Palmer amaranth and water hemp and alfalfa for sustainable management. We had the molecular tools to increase the accuracy of herbicide-resistant weed diagnostics. There was a soybean cyst nematode resistance management, looking at rotation, cover crops, and manures, and then exploring linkages between IPM practices, social network, and successes of carrot weevil management in the Great Lakes and Mid-Atlantic regions. We had some on the development of predictive models for managing spotted winged Drosophila and small fruit. There is the CCA perspective and practices regarding pest resistance, characterizing the ecology and the invasive Asian longhorn tick to inform integrated management. And then the last critical issue one was slowing the spread of the spotted lanternfly. We also had 3 special projects that we funded. There was a North Central Region Herbicide Drift Risk Management Working Group. This was actually brought about by NIFA coming to us and saying with dicamba drift, we needed to have a working group. And so Doug Duhan from Ohio State agreed to lead that. We had the biological control Japanese beetle in the North Central region, and then a climate smart IPM. So we had context, conducted impact analysis on various working groups, and these are just some of the successes or things that the people they interviewed thought were good things about the working groups. And I think the one that came out the most was networking and information sharing. The databases that were developed to share invasive plants, that's been used across states and regions. Lots of resources and outputs for crops that have limited research. And then producing the guides, manuals, compendiums, all those things. Instead of each state doing them separately, they can work together as a group and do a lot better product. And then uniting professionals in fragmented industries, which don't have a lot of resources. A lot of working group members like the listservs. A lot of them have a listserv. They can quickly diagnose problems in the fields and orchards by putting up a picture or something on that, and usually there's a flurry of activity and people can help identify what it is, or at least put the person in the right direction of what to test for. A lot of educational courses have been produced, and those have helped growers gain knowledge. They've done a lot of collaboration on grant writing, and then many educational items have been translated into other languages to help make them available to a wider audience. So the next couple slides, what I did was I just put together some of the actual quotes that Context got from people when they were interviewing them. There were many, many others, but I wanted to just put some of them in. So for the Midwest Grows Green Lawn and Land Forum, they had 50 to 90% reduction in pesticide use. It also helped residents and turf grass managers reduce water use by 80%. In 2016 to 2019, they estimated 100,000 pounds of synthetic fertilizers and over 1,500 pounds of pesticides have been reduced as a result of their pledge that they have with organizations. The Midwest Fruit Management Guide has over 8,000 printed copies annually and 50,000 downloads. Again, a lot of people said the listserv helped diagnose a herbicide injury. A grower had signs of stress, couldn't figure it out. It was posted, and it was concluded it was herbicide damage. The grower said he thought it saved him thousands of dollars because he would have probably put a fungicide on. He thought it was a disease, or he would have added fertilizer to try to help the crop. In pulse crops, the ascochyta blight impacts chickpeas and 20 years ago, it would wipe out the whole field. Now they have a fungicide, which the working group helped get labeled for chickpeas. In hops, again, downy mildew, 100 years ago, when they grew hops in this area, it killed it off, and they couldn't grow it anymore. So the working group focused on downy mildew research, and they've shared those insights, and now downy mildew is controlled. The vegetable beet podcast, many growers reported savings in pesticide usage for more precise application, and sometimes we've eliminated pesticides as a result of understanding the pests and life cycles from diseases from watching these podcasts. The next two are from the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group. Somebody said producing the CCAA for monarch butterflies, they actually have committed 780,000 acres for their company alone to that. And another company stated they had a cost savings of $1.8 million in just half a year due to reduced mowing on interstate rights of way. For the TIC IPM working group, they've increased the interaction and facilitated input from multiple perspectives, and that including those in research and academics, industry, and NGOs studying education on tick-borne diseases. And then the last slide, public gardens, it says development of the database and guidelines has helped gardens and industry be more proactive, and it's resulted in saving time and money. And then the herbicide drift risk, they did a survey of specialty crop growers to understand what their experience has been and the impact from herbicide drift. And the quote was, "We saw a lot for our EPA colleagues that are mitigating drift issues to be looped into the survey results. These results were then shared with other EPA colleagues, and they were also referenced these results in briefing notes for the Secretary of Ag and USDA leadership for active ingredients." Some of the communications things that we did through our center, we have the Pests and Progress webinar, which you're listening to now. Those are recorded and stored on our YouTube channel. We have the I See Dead Plants podcast. Our website is listed there. We have a monthly newsletter, so if you'd like to be on that list, please email us and let us know. And we also have a Twitter account. So I just want to say thank you to lots of people, and there's lots of others that I don't have listed, but I want to thank Laura, Darren, Jackie, and Kelsey at Iowa State, people at MSU that have helped with budgeting and invoices, Context for helping with our evaluation efforts, all of the working groups for all the work they do and all the people they have reached, and I've learned a lot from each of them. The IPM coordinators in each state that we work closely with, the other regional IPM centers and NIFA, and for collaborating on so many IPM issues, and then so many others that I've just had contact with over the last 23 years of working with the IPM Center. And with that, I'd like to take questions.
Thank you, Lynnae. I couldn't have done all of this without you. So amazing amount of work. So if you have any questions, anyone, please feel free to type that into the Q&A down there in the bottom, and Kelsey's dropping in links in the chat for our LinkedIn and Twitter and all those ways to keep track of everything that we're doing. So as we're waiting for questions to come in, I guess like obviously working groups are a big part of what we do in the North Central IPM Center. Like, why do you think they've been so successful?
I think they've been successful because they have included people from outside the region. So if there's anybody interested in the topic that the working group is, they've invited them. We have lots of people from Canada that are on them. So there's that collaboration across borders. They've collaborated on so many bulletins that it would be so hard for one person to write by themselves. They've made big impacts like doing articles and compendiums. The pocket guides that have been asked to be put into other languages in other countries and other languages within the U.S. So I think it's just that collaboration and getting to know each other. When they have their annual meetings, students will give talks, and I think it's great for students because it gives them a chance to give a talk in a place that's not so scary. But they can also ask other researchers, including retired people who still are part of the working group, if they can help with research that they're doing too. So I think it's a collaboration and networking.
Yes. If anyone hasn't attended any, if anyone's on, we do have that list shared. So yeah, if you're attending now and you look at our list of working groups, you're like, oh, that's interesting, or that involves me, just get in touch with, Lynnae, and we'll get you in touch with the proper people. And yeah, they're so welcoming to let anyone join and exciting to join in. So I guess, we got the success, and then I have what's been for you the challenge, what was the challenges during that last funding cycle?
Well, I think like everybody else has said when they've done these talks, the biggest challenge was COVID. We couldn't do in-person meetings anymore, so we had to learn how to use Zoom. And a lot of the working groups were quick to react and went from in-person meetings to like these podcasts that they're doing or webinars. So in some ways, I think it's been great because we've actually started doing more webinars, so more people can actually attend through the Zoom to do it that way. But I think that was it. We even through the center, since we couldn't have travel, we had some leftover funds, so that's where we did some of those special projects. And so I think it just kind of threw a wrench into people's work, but I think in the long run, it worked out well.
Yeah, I really enjoy all the podcasts, you know, the War Against Weeds and the Pulse Crop group. Like, there's been some great podcasts that are fun to listen to. So are there any other questions? I don't see any questions popping in. If not, our next webinar will be January 17th. So good luck to everyone wrapping up their semesters and everything like that. And we will see everyone back here in January. And as I think Kelsey dropped in the chat, we're still recruiting for next year's webinar speakers. So if you're interested in that, please feel free. Although we did get a question just popped in the chat about which is a good one. How much does the center interact with state IPM coordinators or with federal agencies?
Quite a bit, actually. So the state IPM coordinators are part of the multi-state hatch committee, the NCERA 222. We work very closely with them on their meetings. We also, the IPM coordinators are our network for questions we get from EPA or the Office of Pest Management Policy on different pesticides. We go back and forth a lot on that. I think many of us talk to our IPM coordinators quite a bit in the different states. So, and then for regulators, and we talk with NIFA quite a bit because they're our funder. We also work closely, like I just said, with the Office of Pest Management Policy. We're kind of an informal member of the Federal IPM Coordinating Committee. The IPM coordinators and us are also part of the National IPM Coordinating Committee, which is a different group. And then we work closely with EPA. We do pest management strategic plans, which EPA uses a lot for when they're re-registering pesticides to look at that information. So there's quite a bit of those informal and formal connections there.
You're the one to ask if you want to know anything about all of those things. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll wrap up today's webinar and we'll see everyone in January. So have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.